Hello, I'm Susan Nash, AAPG, and I'm delighted to welcome Ashley Zumwalt-Forbes of Black Mountain Metals to talk to us today about opportunities for oil and gas in metals, and also just to mention that this is a part of the AAPG Science and Technology Showcase. So welcome, Ashley.
Great. Thank you so much, Susan. I really appreciate y'all having me on today. So as you outlined, 2 years ago, co-founded a company called Black Mountain Metals. And specifically what I'm here to talk about today is the role that the oil and gas industry can play in metals, but specifically in electrification, in renewables, in energy transition. And I guess just as an initial thought to set up this discussion is I very much believe that, oil and gas and renewables should not see each other as enemies. We need to very much kind of hold hands across the aisle and ensure we're working together to leverage our very complementary skill sets to a greener future. And so lots to talk about here today. My background in Black Mountain's background is in oil and gas. So I'm a petroleum engineer. I was a drilling and completions engineer at Exxon. Black Mountain, really cut its teeth in the upstream oil and gas space. And this is our first foray into renewables, into mining, and it's gone really well so far. So we'll just jump right into it. So table of contents, we can skip. Okay, so first of all, I'm gonna spend like 1 minute on just to orient you on like, who is this woman talking to me? So Black Mountain was founded by a guy named Rhett Bennett. If y'all know Rhett, super entrepreneurial, awesome guy. He started 9 companies since 2007. Mostly in the oil and gas space. But now, we have kind of dual headquarters in Fort Worth, Texas, which is where I am currently and technically where I live, and then Perth, Australia, which pre-COVID is where I was spending between 50 and 75% of my time. And we've got a whole team over there dedicated to metals. And then we also have an oil and gas entity in Australia, specifically natural gas. Okay, so this is just Black Mountain's transaction history. So you can see a lot of our prior investments, our prior companies. We are just a private natural resources operating company. We're not a fund ourselves, but we've partnered with different private equity funds and high net worth individuals to really leverage our nimble entrepreneurial skill set into something that we think is emerging and exciting. And for us, renewables and green technology very much check both of those boxes and have been great for our skill set. So when we started Black Mountain Metals, we landed on nickel and copper being the 2 most compelling metals to invest in. And so I'll walk you through why specifically those 2 metals, because I know, you think electrification and lithium ion batteries and your brain immediately goes, lithium, like I gotta go to lithium, but there are other options. And so electrification has begun to accelerate. I think this is something that, especially in the last year to 2 years, we very much started seeing more and more headlines around electrification, increased EV adoption, and specifically about 3 weeks ago, Elon Musk came out at the Tesla quarterly and said, miners, please mine more nickel. That was his call to the industry, was of anything, I need more nickel. And so please mine it, which is fantastic for, proving our value proposition and continuing to go forward. But if you should take anything out of this slide, it's that electrification is not only coming, but it is accelerating. And so I think, it is each individual's responsibility and each company's responsibility to identify, we're doing oil and gas today. And I firmly believe oil and gas isn't going anywhere necessarily, but I don't think it's going to be a growing industry. In fact, it might be a shrinking industry. And so, you have to figure out how to diversify and leverage those skill sets in new ways. And, really, I find mining to be an incredibly compelling and similar industry to oil and gas. So next big battery breakthrough, and then you're going to see a lot of letters, a lot of letters after that. So NMC 811, what does that mean? So basically, lithium-ion battery cathodes have two pieces, an anode and a cathode. Cathode is really what we care about in this discussion, and specifically, you can see in the two graphs on the right, energy density of cathode materials, and then cathode demand composition. So the energy density is what makes the battery go further. You can drive your car longer without having to recharge. You can use your phone longer without having to charge it. And really, that's the metric that we view as the most important for future adoption. So really where we think folks will be deploying the most research dollars to really maximize that energy density piece. And so importantly, you can see, LMO, LFP, those are kind of historic battery technologies, although LFP has been getting some additional traction, specifically on kind of lower range EV models recently. But once you start getting into the NMC, NCA, so NMC is nickel, manganese, cobalt, and NCA, that's specifically a Tesla cathode chemistry. It's nickel, cobalt, aluminum. And so once you start getting into the nickel rich cathodes, you are getting more and more energy density. And that's not a coincidence. Nickel's actually what gives cathodes their energy density. So if you see these numbers below the acronyms, 111 it's a ratio. So it means 1 part nickel, 1 part manganese, 1 part cobalt. As you see these numbers start increasing, it's the percentage of nickel in a cathode that's increasing. And so as you can see, as there's more nickel, it's more energy dense. Down here, we won't spend too much time on this demand composition, but what's important is looking toward the future. Battery forecasts really show that demand is headed in that more nickel rich chemistry. And so we're going to need a tremendous amount more nickel in the economy. So we kind of saw that writing on the wall and said, like, hey, we're raw materials people, let's try to crack the nickel mining space and see how we can get involved. And so that's exactly what we did, which we'll cover in a few slides. But first, let's see, we might skip over this slide. I like this piece here. So I know the headline of the slide is why nickel, but I kind of like it from a why copper standpoint. So I know, I introduced this saying we have two pillars of electrification for Black Mountain Metals, and it is nickel and copper. So if you look here, the estimated electrification impact per vehicle. So this is average. This is very much like a specific kind of NMC battery, but each vehicle requires 110 pounds of nickel, but it requires 165 pounds of copper. And so copper isn't specifically in the lithium-ion battery, but as we know, copper's fantastic from a conductive standpoint. And really anything that's going to require electrification is going to require more and more copper. We'd probably be remiss talking about batteries without mentioning cobalt. For us, we view cobalt supply as so restricted and so challenged that it does seem that significant research dollars are being deployed into minimizing cobalt percentages in lithium-ion batteries. And so for us, we didn't view that as a real growth wedge going forward, like we viewed nickel or copper. So why copper? Again, it is exactly this graph over here. It shows the conductivity of the various metals coupled with the cost per ounce. So copper has fantastic conductivity, marginally less than silver, but if you look at cost per ounce, I mean, we're probably not going to be paying for gold wiring, for example. It's going to be copper. And so, writing is on the wall. We very much view nickel and copper as effectively the new oil and gas in the electrification economy. And so let's talk about what do we do with that information, right? Okay, Q, Black Mountain Metals. So we went through all that research, came to those conclusions, independently prior to starting BMM, and said like, all right, we have convinced ourselves of this thesis. Let's go try to do something with it. And so what did we do? So we acquired one nickel mine called Lanfranchi. So it's right here. Lanfranchi is a nickel, copper, cobalt mine in the Kimbalda district of Western Australia, which is the third largest nickel sulfide mining district in the world. The first being controlled by Norilsk in Russia, and the second being Sudbury in Canada, which is broadly controlled by Vale and Glencore. So Kimbalda Dome had some actionable opportunities, was nickel sulfide, not laterite. We won't go into that today, but effectively nickel sulfide is a bit of a cleaner version of nickel, easier to process into nickel sulfate, which goes into precursors for lithium ion batteries. So we acquired Lanfranchi nickel mine, again, nickel sulfide mine, and then 20% of a publicly traded nickel mining company called Poseidon Nickel, which actually has the highest grade underground nickel mine in the world. It's called Silver Swan. And over the last kind of 2 months, we've identified a new channel at Silver Swan, which we've deemed Golden Swan. But it's every bit as high grade as the historic Silver Swan nickel mine. And so we are very excited. So assays have kind of come back between 10 and 15% nickel, which is tremendous. I mean, we get excited about kind of 2-3% generally. So this really is just a step change and kind of remarkable on any comparison basis. But really what we've done is we've brought that nimble entrepreneurial execution mindset to the mining industry. And so that's something that Black Mountain has historically done really well in the oil and gas space. And so, the first place we really started was in recruiting folks who knew mining as well as we knew oil and gas. And so I'm co-founder and president of Black Mountain Metals, but we recruited a metals specific leadership team, which I hang my hat on as like best in the business. I think they're amazing. And these three are three of our core members. So last guy, Mick McMullen, is kind of a serial mining entrepreneur. And he was previously CEO of Stillwater, which sold to Sibanye for $2.7 billion. Let's see, kind of probably 2017, 2018. And then he was recently CEO of Detour Gold in Canada, but sold it to Kirkland Lake for $4.5 billion last year. So amazing senior advisor, like what a guy to have on board. And then Dean's our CFO and Declan's our COO, just tremendous talent on the team. And really we were able to come together and identify these opportunities and really create that nimble skill set within the mining business. So there's some of our other leadership team. Sam, who's VP of Commercial, I've actually drug her over to help me on the oil and gas side as well. So she has a full mining background, but she's making a heck of an oil and gas hand. Graham on the exploration side, and then Pete is our VP of Engineering, and he is a lovely guy. So what are our assets? So we talked about Lanfranchi. So it's a historical nickel mining, it's a historic nickel mine, and it's nickel, copper, cobalt. It was previously owned by Panoramic, and we bought the mine off of them. Has tremendous existing resources and reserves, which we've actually increased substantially since we acquired the asset, which has been great. you know,
So I have a question. Okay, so this is so interesting, and a couple of things have come to mind as you've been presenting. The first thing is, I remember a really good interview with Mark Bristow of Barrick Gold a few years ago, it was about a year ago, and he
yep,
was talking about the future of mining is really analytics and making sure that it's high grade. And
yeah,
so, like, good grief, you're doing that perfectly. But then the other big concern is that, well, not just that a lot of resources tend to be in politically volatile areas, but also that there are not that many metal discoveries or deposits.
not
And
at all.
so, I mean, do you think, I mean, this is a really, how does this one stack up to like the world?
So look, all great points. And I would say the like principle, the main investment principle in mining is grade is king. You really need good grade to get a new project off the ground. And exactly for that point around, there haven't been a significant amount of exploration finds over the last kind of 10, 15 years. Um, there's not that wall of supply to come online. So if there's an area or a metal that's going to sharply increase in demand, chances are, we're going to have a shortfall in some way, or commodity price is really going to rise, potentially both. And so if you have existing resources in the ground, it's a great time to have those things that you can mine quickly if commodity price runs. And so it's something that's been really encouraging for us. I would say, something that has changed in kind of the last 15 years in the mining business, and this is something that came from oil and gas. So you do see a lot of technology transfer, but EM surveys, so electromagnetics, we've done
Right.
it for so long down wells in the oil and gas business, but it's something that's relatively new to be used in the mining space and specifically mining exploration. It's been really helpful in our nickel exploration.
Oh, I
So
can imagine, especially in conjunction with gravity and magnetics. So
exactly.
like, how long has this mine, when you purchased it, how long had it been in production before?
It's a historic mine. So it was
Okay.
built in the 70s. And it's been consistently a big producer.
Mhm.
The old owner, Panoramic, put it on care and maintenance in 2015 because of low commodity prices. So, and that was the dynamic all across the basin. So effectively, commodity price bottomed out and people couldn't afford to produce anymore. So they shut their mines in and couldn't raise the capital to restart the mines. We
Mhm.
came in with a view of stronger commodity price and were able to acquire those assets, put some capital in to extend the reserve base, and are now restarting those assets on the back of a significantly higher nickel price and what we view as a structural change in the nickel market with this demand from batteries coming online. And so we're not worried about kind of history repeating itself like it did in 15.
Well, it's super interesting. Earlier in my career, I was in mining, and we had,
Oh, I didn't realize that, Susan. I didn't know that.
yeah, and
Okay.
anyway, copper and gold. But anyway, early on, one of the copper mines, well, a couple of the copper mines, one was that had a heap leach. And so I
Yep.
was thinking, that was in Arizona. There was in
I
a
was
lot.
about to say, did you work in Arizona? It's so common. Yeah.
And so what happened is that it became a strategy for kind of like commodities prices when, because the heap leaching wasn't expensive and the operating cost was not high, then that could be kind of a sustainable model. And then in the case of so many places, it just depends on the regulatory environment, and also the availability of water, et cetera. But I was just wondering if you have anything like that for some of the old tailings and things like that.
Yes, we do. So let me flip slides and I'll address exactly that comment.
Cool.
Poseidon. Okay, so this is a company which we own 20% of, or I don't know, 21 now. Neither here nor there. We own 20% effectively. It's a publicly traded company. This is the company that I was saying had that amazing hit called Golden Swan at the Black Swan resource base. And I am like convinced that Poseidon is going to be an amazing investment. So there are three main assets at Poseidon: Black Swan, Lake Johnston, and then Mount Winter. So Black and Silver Swan, that's going to be the one that comes online first. So they've got an existing concentrator there, which will be quite easy to restart. And then all this exploration that's being done at in successfully with the Golden Swan intersection. Mount Windara is a historic nickel mine. It actually has like a wild story associated with it. If you Google Poseidon bubble, it's something that happened, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 years ago, a different Poseidon that this company was actually named after. But would recommend looking it up. There's a movie about it called The Nickel Queen. It is hilarious. So that's a bit of a different subject.
Oh, that sounds good.
Absolutely. But so at Windara, as you would know, Susan, and probably everyone who's watching this, but nickel has copper and cobalt associated. Sometimes you'll have precious metals. Windara has gold mineralization as well. And so it is also a historic mining area. And as technology does, it improves over time. And specifically on the concentrating side, they've been able to improve recovery percentages of metal over time. But those historic areas that have been mined didn't have that improved recovery. And so you're seeing tailings that have a substantial amount of metal, and they're just sitting in a tailings dam. Like they've already been mined, it's literally right there.
Yeah.
So there is a project.
Yeah, and if you don't do something, they become a liability.
Exactly. And so Poseidon right now has a really exciting project at Windara for tailings reprocessing for specifically the gold, because gold, is at all-time highs. And so it's something that I'm very bullish about. I think it's fantastic. Like you've already taken that risk of mining the ore out of the ground. Now you've got these tailings, and not only can you monetize it through reprocessing for that gold in the tailings, but second to that, like you're eliminating an environmental liability in a future cost of rehabilitation.
Exactly. So reclamation, it just becomes part of that reclamation plan too.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's something that I think Poseidon is real, another reason why I think it's really going to shine in the future. Yes. And so that's actually the end of my presentation. I was thinking I had a wrap-up slide, but maybe not. But so no.
This is really, really interesting. Well, this is silly, but I just found something that might be kind of funny to look at.
Tell me. Oh, I love it. Oh my gosh, where are you in Arizona?
No, I was in Nevada. We had stuff in Nevada too.
Oh my gosh, who did you work for?
I worked Syscon Corporation and Gold Hill. Those are small companies. And Syscon was sold to Hannah Mining. So
good for you, Susan. So I would say here's another reason why, switching between oil and gas and mining, look, it's not the exact same, but it's still a finite resource that we have to figure out how to get it out of the ground. And I have been shocked at how similar the principles are between the two. And looking in the future,
absolutely.
Electrification is about metals. Like we need to leverage those common skill sets and put our best and brightest,
Especially hydrothermal and indicator metals and stuff. And if you look at Mississippi type deposits, then you just see these massive thermal enrichment, and that just totally ties to the development of porosity and permeability and and then a maturation of oil and gas. And actually a lot of the metals that are in there act as catalysts
Yes.
for in the generation of oils or petroleum. So it's just super interesting. My dad is a geologist.
Okay.
So he was in mining as well. And so when things were low in oil and gas, he had a company, his company was in Nevada, but he had properties they had properties in California and Yukon and Arizona and Colorado, just all the different places.
Cool. Yeah.
And so I went to wells with him at times and also to mines.
Look, there's no reason we shouldn't switch back and forth. And I think particularly with major oil companies that you're now starting to see deploy real meaningful capital into renewables.
Yeah.
I also think we need to think about how that major oil and gas skill set fits into the major mining world, because it's still, you know, major capital projects requires large balance sheets, but it's more leverage to that future electrification than oil and gas is. So I think it's a good marriage.
And I really like your point about technology. For example, in Nevada, the so-called invisible gold, that was just a patented process for being able to get the kind of cryptocrystalline, microcrystalline gold out, and so those Carlin type deposits were made available for the first time. People never even saw them before. So I have that hope that there's that type of mineralization in other minerals.
Look, my like motto in life is to never bet against human ingenuity. And I think, you know, just like cracking the code on shale gas and shale oil, like
yes,
we you know, really didn't see that coming, and it just changed everything. I have no doubt that, and if enough smart people study it, like we're gonna crack the code on where this metal is gonna come from. But we need smart people to focus on it, and we need investment dollars to be deployed in it. And so that's why I think folks should do it.
Absolutely. Well, Ashley, it was such a pleasure to have the chance to listen to the presentation and also to chat with you about some of the possibilities and the future. And just really appreciate it.
I really appreciate the time. Okay, Susan, well, have a great day, and thanks again for thinking of me.
Well, thank you.
Cool.
So everyone, this is AEPG, Science and Technology Showcase featuring Ashley Zumwalt-Forbes.
Perfect. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.